ATP, what it do? It's your boy Clay More Rain back at you guys with another one. Yeah, salute to all my subscribers. If this is your first time tapping into the content, I do invite you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit your bell icons as well, so you are getting alerts when all this content is dropping. So, guys, Richard Hitchinson, George Kambosos Jr. in the books. Hitchinson masterclass last night. I mean, talk about masterclass in boxing 101, hit and not get hit. On the back end of Turkey Al Sheikh making remarks about the Tom and Jerry antics going on in boxing, so busy adult putting out petitions for no running clauses, and the complaints going on about performances that have happened with these boxers not willing to engage in the fight and make it more of a point to do everything they can to get out of engagement. This, of course, being the narrative being pushed right now. How refreshing was it to see a fighter like Richard Hitchinson, who's earned himself a reputation of being that boxer, hit, don't get hit. And for his last couple of fights, performances have been what some people might consider lackluster. Now, you saw him against Gustavo Lemos, and it seems like he got exposed a little bit. Seems like maybe he might have been a little bit of a hype train, right? A little bit of a fighter who can dish it, but not necessarily take it, however you want to look at it. But ultimately, pulled out a win with Gustavo Lemos, and a lot of people thought he lost that fight. Then jumped into a title fight against Leon Paro, won that fight pretty decisively. The scorecards may make it look like it was closer than it actually was in real time. But ultimately, Richard Hitchinson understanding that on the back end of the right kind of victory in this fight against a name like George Kambosos on his resume, what it was going to do for his career, he seemed to have keep that in mind, and he put his best foot forward. Hit, not get hit, but causing a lot of damage and ultimately stopping George Kambosos in the 8th round of that fight. I mean, crippling him, taking away everything that he thought he might be able to do, whether it was working the body, whether it was closing the void and applying pressure. Hitchinson was able to handle it all, deter George Kambosos from ultimately getting his game plan across, and ultimately ended the fight in the 8th round with a beautiful body shot that you can see he was setting up from the beginning. I mean, we're talking about the straight science of boxing here, the sweet science of boxing being showcased last night. And as a boxing fan, we all won and all better for it, right? But even with that victory in line and a decent undercard, you had Zaquin Moses on the undercard, showing that he's just levels above the competition, dominating his opponent. 4-0 now, building up his name as a prospect in the game. Can't ask too much from him. What he's doing right now, his future looks promising. But time will tell the story on Zaquin. And of course, we saw Andy Cruz have a, in my opinion, tailor-made opponent for him to showcase his talents and ultimately get a stoppage, which he was able to do in an IBF eliminator fight that put him in position right now to be really the mandatory, I would think, to Raymond Moratala. But we'll see what he plans on doing. He's also ranked pretty high in the WBC rankings as well, so he could be looking to get a title fight with Shakur Stevenson at some point down the line. Future's looking bright for Andy Cruz. We'll talk about that at another time. Today, we're going to talk about Richardson Hitchins. On the back end of a performance like that, on a masterclass like that, Richard Hitchinson jumps in the ring. Hitchins jumps in the ring and calls out your favorite fighters, right? He calls out Devin Haney. He calls out Teofimo Lopez. But he also lets a little bit of a cat out the bag a little bit, right? Something that came out of nowhere. If you really looked at Hitchins in the past couple of weeks and building up to this fight, if you heard him speaking in these press conferences and these fight buildups, this might have been the last thing that you would have heard him say, right? But Hitchinson ultimately came in the ring and made a statement in reference to his free agency, saying that ultimately that this fight, after this fight, he was going to be a free agent. And now, this, he said it in a way, the tonality of his voice would have you believe that he's open to all offers right now. And he just knows that he's raised his market value. His yesterday's price is not today's price. And he's letting the whole entire boxing space, maybe promoters or anybody else who'd be interested in investing in his brand, know that he's open for business right now and is not tied down to anybody. Well, how awkward that might have been for an Eddie Hearn, who invested a lot of time and money with Richard Hitchins. I mean, look, let's let Eddie say it for himself, right? Let's hear what Eddie has to say about it. Let's take a second, listen to Eddie, and then we'll talk about it.
On this kind of stage, to put himself up there with the big boys. when he gets in the ring after, and he, do you feel disrespected by the way he spoke in the ring after about being a free agent? Because I kind of looked at your face and you didn't look too happy.
Yeah, I did feel disrespected because it's not him. It's just dogs around him that put things like, I mean, there is no loyalty in boxing. You've got to look after yourself. But when someone has come in, when you were on the floor, and, I remember when I first met Richardson Hitchins, I mean, the door of his car was falling off. And to be honest, I've spent a lot of money and invested in a young man that I really respect and admire. And I've boxed him at Madison Square Garden. I've headlined him in Orlando when we really didn't sell any tickets and we lost a lot of money. I kept with it. I headlined him in Las Vegas, where again we didn't sell many tickets and we lost money. Then I paid for him to get the opportunity to fight Liam Paro for the world title. Then I paid up for a big opponent in George Kambosos, paid up for the big homecoming in New York. But Richardson is a very good kid. He's just got some snakes around him. And those snakes will make you feel like they're your guy. But the reality is they're bloodsuckers who actually, certain individuals, take a bigger percentage or the same percentage as the promoter that's bankrolling you and paying for your entire path in the sport and making the investment. Managers have zero risk, right? They just let the promoter do all the work. They negotiate the deal. And by the way, a good manager is good for your career. But they just let the promoter do all the work, make the investment, risk their money, and then after the fight go, thank you very much, pay me for a couple of phone calls, right? And I just understand the game. So it doesn't infuriate me.
Right. So we don't want to get too deep in the video, right? Shout out to IFL, to IFL TV. That was a clip from them. An interview they did yesterday with Eddie Hearn, pretty much responding to the way Hitchinson, announced his free agency. And it did hit kind of weird. It did look different. It came out of nowhere. I didn't expect that. I didn't know he was going to be a free agent, but even if he was on the back end of a victory like that, the whole build up to this fight, he was completely giving Eddie Hearns his flowers for everything he did for him. He, in plenty of interviews, spoke about how he was coming out of a dire situation, still living in the projects. How Mayweather Promotions, the biggest payday he ever got with Mayweather Promotions was $50,000 for a fight. That was for a specific fight. Most fights he wasn't getting paid that much, and how Eddie Hearn, was getting paid 3 times and north of that of how much his highest pay was there. He seemed very grateful to Eddie Hearns for everything Eddie Hearns did for him, and maybe he still is. But ultimately, as we heard Eddie Hearns say, he foot the bill for a lot, invested in him when nobody else seemed like they were very interested in investing in him. He speaks about when he found him, the door on his car was getting ready to fall off. I mean, we don't know how true or exaggerated these points are, but at the end of the day, the boxing business, and just like a lot of businesses, a dog eat dog world, right? Loyalty is very finite. You don't find it in many places, and when you do find it, you usually keep those people close to you as possible because you understand how diabolical the game is. Now, this is not Eddie Hearn's first rodeo. He's definitely been down this road before. He's worked with a lot of fighters and been in danger of losing them in their highest moments. When we look at Devin Haney, we look at even right now with Shakur Stevenson, rumors are circulating that this may be his very last fight with Shakur Stevenson, finally getting him in the ring with the Williams Zepeda, introducing him and middlemaning him a deal with Turki Al-Sheikh and all these different things that Eddie Hearn did for Shakur Stevenson's on the back end of a toxic deal he came off with Top Rank. And ultimately we don't know what other opportunities and offers were necessarily out there. We got to assume that if Shakur went in the Eddie Hearn direction, it was probably the most lucrative out of all the offers that were on the table. So at the end of all that, to see Shakur Stevenson potentially maneuver his way into another situation, I'm sure from Eddie Hearn's point of view, depending on how much he's made with him and how much good business he's done with Shakur Stevenson, once again, he's left out in the dry, in the sun to dry, right? Same thing with Devin Haney, working with Devin Haney, getting out of Devin Haney's way when he wanted to go ahead and become undisputed, allowed him the free agency he needed to be able to go and make a deal with Top Rank, a 3-fight deal where he was able to fight George Kambosos twice, become an undisputed lightweight champion, and ultimately get one of his biggest fights on his resume against Vasily Lomachenko. Got out the way for that. Put him in a position and got out the way for him to get in a fight with Ryan Garcia with Golden Boy Promotions. And on the back end of a loss with Ryan Garcia, still tried to invest in it. But, ultimately, Devin Haney and him never seem to be on the same page when it comes time for Devin Haney to make his biggest fights. And here we are with Richard Hitchins. Richardson Hitchins, who's a great fighter, always been a great fighter, but needed that opportunity, need that stage, needed the space to be able to showcase his talent, to show the world what he already knew and people in his camp knew. And as Eddie Hearns stated, as we saw, he facilitated that, paid up, got in charge Kambosos, signed him, got a common name with the main fighters he wants to fight between Devin Haney and Teofimo Lopez, put him in position. Although, you have to give Richardson Hitchins his credit. He did perform. It was on the back of his performance that he gets the recognition he does. But also, would he have even been in a ring with the George Kambosos at this point in his career? Or would he have to have gone up the road and done it a different way? Would he have had to go on ahead and fought Sabril Matias instead of waiting it out and fighting Liam Paro? Would he have to get up in there and fight Gary Antoine Russell or other opponents that are in the division that might have been a little bit more of an uphill battle for him? Pulling up a lightweight 135-pounder coming off of a stoppage with Vasily Lomachenko, arguably losing his last 4 fights, and then giving him a quick little tune-up with a nobody from Australia to put him in the ring with Richardson Hitchinson, so Hitchins could look at that way. Some people might consider Eddie Hearn a pretty smart man and doing a pretty good job promoting his fighter. But in this world, it's eat or be eaten. So Richardson Hitchins communicates to the space that he's a free agent. Eddie Hearns later on in this interview here on the IFL interview communicates that, listen, he'll have to see if he even wants to, if he's still interested in the Richardson Hitchins business, because at the end of the day, loyalty is something he holds dear to his heart, and you can't knock him for that, right? Could Richardson Hitchins have maybe communicated that more in a private way and had a little bit more professionalism about the way he approached it? Probably, but he chose to do it the way he did it, right? Well, on the back of that, Keith Connolly, his manager, also the manager of Teofimo Lopez, and conveniently enough, also the manager of Edgar Berlanga, right? Another fighter who left Eddie Hearns after his biggest fight and didn't seem very grateful for what Eddie Hearn did for him, right? Eddie Hearn seems to believe that Keith Connolly is the reason or the voice in the ear of these fighters, who's instructing them to move the way they're maneuvering. As you can see in that interview right there, he was pretty much leaning towards the idea that Hitchinson is, almost an innocent bystander, right? A good kid, an honorable kid, but, falling victim to the people that are around him and the people who say they got his back, even though they didn't work from the ground up with him the way he did. It's crazy in this boxing game. It really is. It's crazy in business in general. And this is why you'll see Eddie Hearn moving with certain fighters, even with a Jerron Boots Ennis, investing as much as he did. If you wonder why Eddie Hearn has always seemed to be pushing or pressuring for Jerron Boots Ennis to head into the direction of a 154-pound weight class division, well, it's because he's protecting his bottom line, probably, right? He understands that if Jerron Boots Ennis is sitting in Turki Al-Sheikh's crosshairs in a division where Turki Al-Sheikh is willing to finance and facilitate the resources needed to put on the biggest fight for Jerron Boots Ennis, get him his big paydays, but also put him in a position where he's not spending money out of his pocket and he can get his percentage off the top. He'll probably lean in that direction, especially coming towards the end of a contract, unless he knows he has a fully committed, loyal fighter on his hands, like let's say an Anthony Joshua, right? Always want to protect your bottom line. Even the same thing with a Shakur Stevenson right now, fighting against a William Zepeda. More than likely Eddie Hearn will more than likely not be part of the deal between Gervonta Tank Davis and Shakur Stevenson. He won't be probably part of the deal between Teofimo Lopez and Richardson Hitchins, or Devin Haney and Richardson Hitchins. These fighters are probably going to hit more of an independent route, especially with the likes of a Turki Al-Sheikh in the game now, who's working directly with fighters. It's harder for these promoters to build these guys up and have faith that they'll be able to recoup their profit later, that these fighters will be loyal to them and stick with them when they're finally at their biggest level to allow these promoters to recoup what they invested in the beginning when they weren't those big names. It is interesting to watch the game develop and watch the and and watch where there's no love, right? The game has no love for you at the end of the day. And Eddie Hearn seems to be very familiar with that. He communicated, he's very familiar with the way the game works. But at the end of the day, the game goes both ways, even though you have plenty of leverage on your side and things that you can use to your advantage and maybe make him seem like he's not worth as much to you or you don't need him as much. He has other ways as well, obviously, with the elbows and the connections that he's made in the games and the things that he can do. So normally I would say everybody should just treat each other fairly and keep it real clean so that everybody can move smoothly. But sometimes, growing pains is a mother, right? But you guys let me know what you think in the comment section. Eddie Hearns seems very caught off guard by Richardson Hitchins' statement last night in the ring saying that he is a free agent. That being said, where does Richardson Hitchins go at this point? You guys want to see him stay with Eddie Hearn, or would you rather see him move on? And if you would rather see him move on, where do you think Richardson Hitchins would look better, if not with Matchroom at this point in his career? Let me know what you think in the comment section, guys. Thank you again to all my subscribers. If this is your first time tapping into the content, I do invite you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Hit your bell icon next to the subscribe button so you're getting alerts when all this content is dropping. And before you get out of here, guys, remember to hit that like button. Let's get a thumbs up for the content. Helps the video get in front of the right eyes. It's your boy Rain. We'll keep a close eye on this one. Until the next one, you guys know what it is. It's that ATP Combat Media Show. And at this point, we out.